Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine and I'm now joined by Seb Stafford-Bloor.
Hello, Joe Devine.
And Alex Stewart.
Hello.
Hello there. Today is another Sensible Transfers episode. Now, I hope you're all viewing and enjoying the Sensible Transfers videos that we have been releasing on the Tifo Football channel so far. I believe we have Manchester United and Spurs. By the time you're listening to this, I also think Arsenal, maybe? Can't remember. Anyway, one of them will be out.
Real Madrid, actually.
Oh,
Joe.
Real Madrid. Even better. Yeah. Is it? I don't know. But I don't,
Sure
maybe it is.
Yes.
For some people, for other people, not. And today we'll be continuing our Sensible Transfers podcasts, where instead of focusing on clubs, we focus on players. We have a list of players, some of whom have been provided by the YouTube community. So thanks to everyone who submitted some names, and we're interested to hear us talk about them. I believe Seb has added a few today as well, because we'll be focusing on free agents, of which the number is large, and there are some pretty great names on this list. So some of them, I believe, will be free agents officially as of the summer, but are available to talk to other clubs now in January. This will be a fun episode, I think, and I believe you'll be surprised to hear of the quality on this list. Before we get to that stage, we also have a special segment at the beginning where we're going to talk to Matt Slater about a situation developing with the prospective purchase of Burnley. Now, that's very interesting. I will direct you, when we start talking to Matt, to an article he's written that you can read to get the full details and the full information. It's interesting, let's put it that way. So we're going to chat to Matt for 10 minutes, then we're going to get into transfers. And at the end of the podcast, Seb, you spoke to someone else.
Sure did, Joe. I spoke to Gregg Evans, who is the Athletics Aston Villa correspondent. And it was great to catch up with him, actually, because last time we had him on the pod, it was just after Villa had escaped relegation. And obviously 6 months later, they're much improved, and we talked about all the reasons why.
I will point out that you've spoken to Greg this morning, which is Friday the 8th, before they play, I think, their youth team against Liverpool in the FA Cup, right? So it won't include that.
Well, we deliberately stayed clear of all COVID matters just because it's obviously quite a fluid situation. But yes, Villa will play Liverpool in the Cup with what Greg described actually as more of an under-17 side, which sounds quite strange. So we'll see how that goes. But obviously, we did record before that happened, yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, that's what we've got coming up for you today on the Tifo Football Podcast. But for now, I will leave you in the warm hands and the cool embrace of Matt Slater. Okay, so I'm joined now by Matt Slater of the Athletic to take us through the situation with Burnley and the takeover. So Matt, first, can you start by telling us about ALK Capital? Who are they, and who is the new chairman, Alan Pace?
Well, yeah. Hello, everybody. So ALK Capital, they are a relatively new sports investment group. They've been around in the States a little bit longer, but they registered here, a UK branch in September, offices in the States and London. The main player, the front man, is Alan Pace, a guy who spent about 20 months, I think back in 2006, 2008, as president of Real Salt Lake, who at the time were one of the expansion teams in the MLS. And prior to that, he'd worked pretty much, sort of Wall Street type jobs. He's sort of a salesman for banks. After his stint with Real Salt Lake, he went back to the financial world, worked for Citibank, who are an enormous multinational bank, and has been doing that for basically the last decade or so. But clearly loves sports, interested in sports. And about a year ago, 6 months ago, moved away from the financial world and has been looking to buy a sports club, sports clubs, and sports related companies. So is interested in building like a lot of American investors, that kind of intersection between technology, media, and sport. That's where it's all at for these guys.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of the deal structure for Burnley itself, it's reported by you to be £150 million for 84% of the club, but only 15% of its own money. Can you walk us through where the rest of the money is coming from?
Yeah, it's a little bit complicated, and perhaps the best way to start here is this story has been a long time in the making, just as the deal has been a long time in the making. Burnley have been for sale for a while, about a year, maybe longer, depending on who you talk to. That whole kind of principle of for sale and for sale, like signs outside the house, or maybe an offer type situation. Burnley have been in the market, and people have looked at Burnley and had conversations with the directors at Burnley, the former directors at Burnley, for some time now. ALK, as I say, have set up specifically to basically private equity. I've mentioned Alan Pace. He's got some other partners there. One of the key guys is someone called Dave Checketts, who has a longer track record in US sport. He's had senior roles in NBA, Utah Jazz, New York Knicks, I think, as well as involvement in MLS. It was him that basically employed Pace at Real Salt Lake. He was the owner there. He's since sold that franchise. So it's a private equity business getting into, as I say, sport. Now, the story that I published had numbers in it. They were based on at least half a dozen sources, good sources that had knowledge of the deal. I had other sources, and they all crystallized around that. There was a range. There was a range of the total value of Burnley, if you like. They haven't bought all the shares. They bought 84% of the shares because two of the previous directors have stayed on, most notably Mike Garlick, who was the main shareholder. Burnley used to be owned by local businessmen. They sort of rescued the club and have run it very, very well, very, very sustainably for some time. And that has really been the story of Burnley, both the success on the pitch and this very careful, sustainable approach off the pitch. Now, Garlick and one of his co-directors have stayed on, and they've retained some shares. But 84% they have bought. Now, the deal is complicated. They are paying in instalments, and there is various ideas about how long these instalments are and how much they've paid up front. Now, my sources have told me that they believe that ALK have committed to pay about £150 million for these shares. Could be a bit more. I don't think it's any less, but could be a bit more. And they have borrowed most of it. Now, the full amount that they will borrow will really depend on these defer payments, because they haven't paid all of it yet. There is more instalments to come. But they have certainly borrowed, I think, at least... Well, I've said 80 million for the total transaction. Bloomberg, famous, US business outlet, have gone with 60 million out of an 100 million pound upfront payment. I think it's a little bit more. I think these deferred payments will involve more borrowed money. Now, the people they've borrowed from, this is quite important, are MSD Capital, another private equity firm, long established, been around since the 90s. It is the family office of Michael Dell, the man behind Dell Computers. Basically, it is his investment arm. It is a investment company set up to manage his family's wealth. And they invest in lots of businesses. But in the last couple of years, they have got into English football in a big way. And they are already lending money to Derby, Southampton and Sunderland. So this is now their fourth club that they're lending money to. I think they're lending about 80 million to ALK. Now, the rest of the money that they are paying the previous shareholders for those shares is a small stake from them. I wrote in my story is 15 million. I've since heard that's the top end of what they're going to pay. That I could even have given them more credit, if you like, in terms of an upfront payment from ALK itself. It could be less, and the rest. And this is really interesting. And this is one of the I think the most interesting things of the whole deal. But one of the sort of unique things about Burnley is that Burnley have been sitting on cash for a long time. I mentioned how sustainable they were. The directors were neither putting money in or taking money out, but they were allowing it to accrue cash. Now that just is another asset then that you buy. And there's lots of kind of clever reasons why you might want to do this. Of course, it makes them more attractive to people trying to buy them, because you can say, buy me for £100. Oh, by the way, I've got 50 quid in the bank. That's yours. So really, you've just spent 50 quid. Now they could have obviously taken that money out themselves to pay themselves dividends. There are sort of conversations about what's more tax efficient as a way of taking money out of a business. It's just a really intriguing part of the deal. Now, my sources, and I'm absolutely convinced and certain of this. And as I said, there have been a lot of to and fro between the Athletic and ALK's PR firm on this. That there was at least 50 million in cash in Burnley when ALK bought the deal. Now that can be used to pay, as I say, the directors on the way out. It can be used to finance the club for the next year, 2 years. Obviously not a Premier League club, but it can be used as part of the financing going forward, and it can be used in the January transfer window. So there was cash in Burnley. It had been sitting there. We knew, because it's public available records at Company House, that as of summer 2019, the most recent accounts that we can see, there was £42 million in the bank account. So in the 18 months since, they have hardly spent any money. I think it's a very small net transfer of about 10 million. But they were accruing cash. They were a business that they were on top of their wages. They're basically paying about 60% of their turnover on wages. It crept up a bit to about 63%, but well within kind of sensible parameters, and they could accrue cash on that. Okay, yes, 9 months of the last 18 months have been affected by the pandemic, but Burnley came 10th, 83%. 80% plus of their money comes from TV. They don't make much money on Matchday anyway, so there's not a huge hit there. They don't make that much money commercially. So really it's about broadcast. Broadcast has held up. They came 15th the season before. They came 10th last season on a better TV deal anyway. So yes, they could accrue cash even in a pandemic. So that's it. So ALK have bought the shares. And it's interesting because we haven't had that many Premier League takeovers. We just haven't. That's one of the reasons why everyone is talking about this deal. And I can assure you, everyone is talking about this deal in the industry. They have borrowed a lot of it, and the rest of the money they've put a small stake in, but the rest of it is cash that was in Burnley's bank account.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the interesting thing that sort of differentiates this from the deal for Manchester United, for example. We've heard a lot about that over the years, the leveraged buyout, and there's an aspect to this Burnley deal which is similar. But the idea that cash from Burnley's bank account itself is being used to buy Burnley is very interesting to me. There's a great quote from a source within the article, which I'll read now. It says, Manchester United was bought entirely on debt, as we say, so it's not illegal. If Pace buys it on debt, he can finance that debt, invest in the team, get into Europe and increase the revenues by £50 million a year, and then that's not a bad plan. But it means that they have to increase their revenues by £50 million a year, and that isn't easy. Can you walk me through the consequences, Matt? Because it sounds a little bit like this is quite a risky proposition.
It is, but you've seen their quotes, and you've quoted that one. But I think we then have to mention the fact that ALK, whilst they refuse to talk about the terms or the details or the amounts of the deal, they keep reassuring fans, and they've pushed back at my story and said, what we've done is reasonable. We're sensible people. We're not going to make the mistakes that people have made in the past. People have talked about Sunderland and other clubs, Bolton, that have borrowed too much money or struggled once relegated. They've said no. This is a good deal. We've got a good lender. And they've made this analogy with, a mortgage and buying your house, which is fine. And you're absolutely right to say that this is not that unusual when people buy businesses. You use debt to do it. Debt is efficient in sort of, in tax terms. You can take your interest payments off your operating profits, and that's tax deductible. So there's a sort of sense to it that this is how the wheels of business turn, right? But from football point of view, Burnley were debt free. They've been debt free for a very, very long time. They have not been paying interest to anybody. Now they are. That's the big change. Now, what ALK will tell you is say, okay, look, fine. This is a cost of business going forward. What we're going to do, because we're coming at this with energy and coming at it with a sort of an international focus, is we're going to grow Burnley's commercial revenues. So don't worry about that debt, that interest payment. It's manageable. We look at our cash. We've been accruing cash. We can pay that interest. And anyway, we're going to grow the business. We're going to become this sustainable Premier League club. And ideally, who knows, we can perhaps even make Europe. And they have had a season in Europe within, in the last few years. And they made quite a lot of money that season. So this is what they're saying. It's going to be continued, sustained success on the field. We're going to grow the commercial revenues of this club, which are pretty small. I think they were sort of 15th, 16th in the Premier League table in terms of commercial revenue, about 15, 16 million a year. So there's upside there. And he's talked about, what have Burnley got? They're Britain's favourite underdog. Fine. So it's all good. The talk is good. The energy is good. And I genuinely believe that it's sincere too. But you speak to anybody that has looked at these deals in the past, and there have been so many of them. Everyone comes in with this kind of rhetoric. Everyone comes in and believes that they can do this. At the end of the day, Burnley have been brilliantly run by local directors, local fans. They've had a fantastic manager, and they've punched above their weight. Now, at some point, lots of clubs get relegated. It's just a fact. If you're not one of the big six, and maybe sort of a Leicester or an Everton, or someone who's pretty close, you're only a bad couple months away from, oh dear, right? We're looking at relegation here, and then that changes everything. If you are getting 83% of your money from Premier League central handouts, central payments, well, that's a sort of existential business threat right there. And they have made money on player trading, and he is very, very interested in analytics and data. He's bought a couple of data companies already, analytic companies already, small football ones that no one really heard of, but he's a big clue as to what he wants to bring to the table. We're going to use data to drive our recruitment. And I look forward to seeing how that goes with them, and and how that works with Dyche and the model that he has, and all very exciting. But what he's telling Burnley fans is, don't worry. Yes, we've put debt on the club, debt that wasn't there before, and MSD charges, it's private equity. It's pretty easy to work out what they charge, because you can work out what they borrow at, and I've got pretty good sources to know what they charge at other places. It's about 9%, 9 and a bit percent. There's lots of fees in there as well, and it can get to 12% if you start missing payments. But that, if they have borrowed, as I believe, about 80 million, and it could be a bit more when they have to pay the rest of the money for the shares, you could be looking at upwards of interest payments of about 10 million a year. That's 10 million coming out of Burnley that hasn't been coming out of Burnley. So Alan Pice is asking the fans to say, trust me, I have a business plan, I have a track record in finance. He's saying I've got a track record in sport. I would argue he doesn't really, or it's certainly not very recent. I'm not sure how relevant it is, MLS 12, 13 years ago to Premier League now, but fine. That's just a matter of opinion, and there are other people within his group who do have more recent experience of sport. But he is essentially saying, trust us. That is a manageable interest payment. Just watch how we get on.
Can I ask you to very briefly, for us to end, spell out a hypothetical? Let's suggest that Burnley, as you say, maybe are only a couple of bad months away from a relegation, or maybe they are losing Sean Dyche and a couple of their better players away from a relegation next season. These things can happen, and immediate repromotion does not appear. What does the situation look like then?
I just want to sort of preface that point by saying I'm not picking on Burnley. The point about them being about a month or two away from relegation applies to half the Premier League. Half the Premier League every season.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is just the reality of the Premier League and the reality of competing at that level, and the competition. That is the risk that you buy into. And clubs like Bournemouth, Swansea, Bolton all look like solid Premier League clubs until they weren't. So that is just as stark as that, really. Now, Burnley, no doubt, and ALK, no doubt, will have done some forward projections that have done 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and they probably have factored into a relegation within that. I'd like to think they had, certainly within a 10-year plan, that they could be relegated within that spell. And they've, in the last 10 years, they've been relegated, I think, twice, and they've popped straight back. They certainly popped back the last time. And, they did it well. They did it a bit like Newcastle did. They went straight down. They came back as champions. They made a relatively small loss in that championship season. I think their championship season, they lost about 5 million. The following year, boom, back into profit because they're back into the Premier League. So they have a proven track record at managing a relegation. Now, the problem, of course, becomes if you don't bounce straight back. Ideally, don't get relegated. Okay, we've already discussed that is unlikely in the long term for half the Premier League clubs, right? So bounce straight back then, as a Newcastle, a Burnley have done in the past, a West Brom maybe. If you don't, then you're looking at the Sunderland example, the Bolton example, the Wigan example, where the parachute payments, which don't cover every cost anyway, dwindle, run out. You start to lose players, you start to lose a manager. Suddenly you can get stuck in that nightmarish situation in the Championship of, what do I do? Do I keep stretching, keep reaching? It's close. The Premier League's there. I can see it. I can just reach out and touch it. At the same time, you were just compounding your losses. And then who knows? I don't need to finish that because that thought is there surely. So that's it. The situation is really that Burnley have changed, and the reason I have been looking at Burnley. I have no personal animus against them. The only things I've written about Burnley in the past have been full of respect for their business model and for the fact that they are this sort of, they punch above their weight. And I admire that. But my concern around the messaging from ALK and the club, but particularly from ALK, I didn't think was entirely, I don't want to say honest or dishonest, but I don't think they were telling the full picture. I still don't think fans fully understand what has happened to their club. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying it has changed. Burnley, as a club, as a company, as a business entity going forward, are different. Let's see how they get on.
Okay, let us begin now. Part 2, where we discuss the free agents or players who are going to be free agents in the summer, who are currently free to talk to clubs. This list is amazing. And I don't know if it's worth what do you think? Should we leave them with some tension as we go through, or shall I just read some of the players on this list now?
Definitely tension. Tension.
Okay, let us begin then with... Let's begin with David Alaba, who a name probably won't surprise people because we've mentioned it before in some videos, and also this discussion has been around town. But David Alaba is, 2 years ago, I thought of him as the one of the best defenders in the world. Is this still the case? What's the situation at Bayern, Seb? Why is he leaving? Because presumably he'll be very sought after.
He sure will, Joe, because it's easy to forget this, but he's still only 28 years old. I know he feels like he's been around forever, but he's still theoretically in his prime and can play a variety of different positions. And yeah, it's interesting because I wonder how the market views him positionally, because obviously at Bayern Munich, his sort of he's obviously zeroing in on his 10th Bundesliga title as of this season, which is an amazing statistic. Yeah. But I wonder whether he'll be sort of classified as a utility player or a left back or a left-sided centre half in a 3. I mean, he's such a dexterous footballer that you wonder whether he'll be treated as such, as a kind of a utility option for all the best sides around Europe.
Well, I wonder whether it would depend, given his pedigree, it will depend on where he wants to play. Might be where he goes. So I wonder if that could be the case. Alex, tell us a little bit more about that, because as Seb describes him, he can be a utility player. He obviously started his career, or at least the majority of his career as a left back. But recently he's been playing as a centre back. We know he can play as a defensive midfielder too. Tell us a little bit about him as a player.
Yeah, I mean he is incredibly versatile. He, like you say, left back with incredible pace, but also the ability to cut inside, to play as an inverted fullback, as Guardiola calls them, which is something that Guardiola used him to do at Bayern Munich. So he's got the technical ability to play further up the pitch. At Bayern, on the left side of that central defence, he's the guy tasked with bringing the ball forwards out of defence, spraying passes around. It's worth noting that both him and Jerome Boateng are consistently sort of towards the top end of European central defenders for progressive passing and moving the ball forward. So he's basically able to do anything from almost, I would say, central midfield back. Obviously, with the emergence of Alphonso Davies, he's not really required as a left-sided defender for Bayern anymore. But it's an interesting one because, as Seb said, he's only 28, but he has been at Bayern his entire career, with the exception of a brief loan spell at Hoffenheim when he was 18. So I think this is very much an instance of fresh pastures and new challenges, as much as it is, there's no reason that Bayern wouldn't want to hold on to him. It's not like he's dropped off in performance suddenly or anything. This is, I think this is the player making a decision to try and find something different, and he will appeal to every single top club in Europe that could afford him.
Well, I was going to ask specifically, because we've covered Manchester United already in a Sensible Transfers video. The reason I bring them up as a club is because one of the roles that you identified as something that could be required or could be something to be looked at is a left-footed or left-sided centre-back. David Alaba would seem to fit this. He doesn't appear in the video. I just wondered if there was a reasoning behind that thinking, or if there were just better options out there, you think?
Well, it's partly because we picked him for somewhere else. But no,
oh yes,
there's. Oh yes, not to.
Forgot about that.
Well, it's not a spoiler because that video will be out, I think. But no, I mean, he's the thing with him is that he is left-footed, and I know we get some stick on YouTube for being slightly obsessed with left-footed centre backs, but with Manchester United particularly, I think there is a deficit of left-footed players in that squad. Really, only Luke Shaw and Tellez are kind of the natural left-footers there. And so having a player that can open up both sides of the pitch from the left side is really important. Alaba's got good pace, so as a recovery defender, he'd work well. My only concern with Manchester United is that Maguire likes to be the defender that brings the ball out and sprays passes around, and is actually quite good at that and does it from the left-hand side. So whether United would have two centre-backs that were both comfortable doing that, I'm not sure that would necessarily work. At United, he could also be used as that deeper lying defensive midfielder as well. I think he's got the game awareness, the speed to cover that position, and obviously it would bring in a left-footed player, but one that can play slightly further up the pitch. So he would work there.
Really interesting proposition. Okay, Seb, any other thoughts on David Alaba? Where can you imagine seeing him play?
I just think it makes a little bit of sense, potentially, for him to go to Manchester City, but then to play as a fullback. Because if you were to replace Benjamin Mendy with David Alaba and involve him in that Guardiola system, which sees him kind of almost tuck into a deep central midfield position, you have all the benefits of his playmaking ability. Plus, of course, he's a wonderful set-piece taker. So it's it will come down to finances, of course, and we're still in the process of finding out who can afford what and who's been affected by the last 9 months. So it's interesting, but that would be.
Can I pick up on that City point though? Because do you know what? Watching them for the last couple of games, I've been really impressed with Joao Cancelo. I'm wondering, are City still in the habit of tucking both of their fullbacks inside, or are they doing one and not the other? Because Joao Cancelo, I think he's been with the exception of his kind of funny little fight with Luke Shaw throughout the last 20 minutes of the game over the weekend. I thought the last two games I've seen him play, outstanding.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with any of that. I think he's been excellent. I'll be interested to see what happens when Kyle Walker is available again, to see whether Cancelo keeps his place. But yeah, I wouldn't quibble with that. I think the objective over time will still be to tuck those fullbacks in, because I wonder at the moment whether the football we're seeing in the Premier League is a little bit more transitional than normal. It's a little bit more basketballish than it otherwise would be. And I feel like we're watching a lot of broken football, which benefits fresh, physically capable players. Maybe when it becomes a little bit more strategic, i.e. when it settles down a little bit more, that shape will return. I don't know, though. It's a very good point about Cancelo.
I think it's worth saying that, that Alaba, as I said before, Alaba started to do that quite consistently under Guardiola at Bayern, but also it could solve another problem for Man City in that it would allow Guardiola to persist with Rodri as the deepest central deepest central midfielder, because he'd have the additional cover, and that would mean that City would be less porous on transition, but would also have the ability to progress play in the way that Guardiola wants to do. So I think it's a very sensible suggestion.
Okay, great. Well, that's David Alaba. Good luck to him, whatever he does. I like him. Good player. Let's move on and discuss, who shall we pick from this lovely Tell you what, let's do Memphis Depay, because he does come up in another Sensible Transfers video, not yet released. We can discuss him now anyway. What I'm curious about largely with Memphis Depay is, he's shone so far in Liga, but of course he did have a spell at Manchester United in the Premier League. Will there be clubs that will be worn away as a result of his sort of lower impact in a bigger league, or was that simply a case of a move too early, do you think, Seb?
I can't decide, Joe. I'm really hesitant to judge him on what happened to Man United, because if you think about what's involved in going between the Eredivisie and the Premier League, and not just any old Premier League club at Man United, that's difficult enough. When you do it at the age of 21, that's even harder. So I think it's a little bit unfair to potentially cite maturity issues or put these red flags, into what has been a really good resurgence at Lyon. But then again, this is how football works. Like, if you've shown that you can't quite do it at a big club, all of a sudden, similar-minded clubs get a little bit nervous about spending large sums of money on you. Now, in this instance, there's no transfer fee involved, but Memphis Depay would command a very large wage because, well, he deserves it. He's played exceptionally well, in spite of that serious injury. I think there will be some clubs who are wary of his personality. He's quite an outgoing person. He has interests beyond football. And for whatever reason, there are just some sporting directors who don't like that, who kind of prefer it when players are, entirely dedicated to what they do on the pitch. And he gives the impression of being more than just a footballer, which I think is credit to him. But, other people would disagree with that, I think.
Yeah. Well, Alex, as Seb says, he has had I don't want to call it a renaissance, because it's not. I mean, it's, with the context there of the age and everything when he was at Manchester United, but he's had an incredible spell at Lyon. Tell us a little bit about him now as a player, what he's achieved performance-wise, and where you think he might fit in elsewhere.
He's certainly getting a good return on goals per 90. His best season, really, apart from the one when PSV won the Eredivisie back in 2014-15, was the season at Lyon, not the first one, he joined the second one, where he hit 19 goals. I think the issue with someone like Depay is that he's, I don't want to say too versatile, because that's probably a silly thing to say, but with football using inverted wingers and strikers a lot, you get certain players, and Depay is one of them, and there are plenty others. So Marcus Rashford maybe is a good example too, where the versatility of that player, either in a wide position cutting inside or as a centre forward, means that they can sometimes be moved around a little bit depending on who else is there, and so it can make it difficult sometimes for a really top side to look at a player like that and go, well, they're definitely one thing or they're definitely the other. I think Depay still at 26 is probably, he has a big move ahead of him. And what a team buying him would need to do is definitively stake him being a left inside forward or a striker, and kind of go with that consistently. But, he's the kind of player who can do either well. He drops off well, he drives the ball forwards, he's got good shooting from range. But again, he can operate inside the penalty area, quick movements to get away from markers and so on. So it's a question of finding what you think his best role is within a particular setup, and then consistently using him there rather than moving him around as like a piece in a jigsaw.
How old is he now?
26.
Time really flies, isn't it? How is Memphis Depay 26 and David Alaba is 28? That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
These are both players who made their top flight debuts when they were 17. So they have been around for a long time, and it's, I think sometimes it can, time marches on, and then you suddenly think, oh God, I had you in a Football Manager save 10 years ago, and you're still doing stuff, and you're only that age. But he's got a good and consistent scoring rate.
Oh, that's good. I'm not looking forward to being of the age where I'm older than every professional football player in the Premier League. Who's the oldest Premier League player right now?
It's probably one of the backup goalkeepers, isn't it?
It would probably be someone like
I'm
Scott
going to
Carson.
Google it.
Yes.
Oldest Premier League player now. Who have we got here? Transfermarkt, a wonderful site. I accept your cookies. The oldest player at the moment... Oh, this is youngest. Willy Caballero, who was 38 years old and 11 months, so almost 39 when he played in September last year. In a 3-3 draw. So who's older than 39? No one's older than 39 here, are they?
No, I'll be 39 in March.
Oh. So you're just, as soon as Willy Caballero retires, you're the oldest one. Oh, that's exciting to me. That's exciting to me.
But hey, Gigi Buffon's still going, and he's 42, so...
No, that's true. He's the real marker. I've got some time yet. Seb's got a few years. We'll be fine. Everything's fine. Memphis Depay has a few years left too. Hopefully more than a few. I would like to hear... Let's go to Seb first. I want a team that he could play at well, please.
Inter Milan, because I sketched out a little scenario where Lautaro Martinez leaves in the summer, and I'm not entirely sure that Depay is an Antonio Conte player, but I quite like the idea of a Depay-Lukaku centre-forward pairing, in the same way that I kind of see him maybe as the player Conte wanted Alexis Sanchez to be, really, in that kind of system, sort of a multi-purpose, broad-ranged attacker. I just think it would be interesting, and I think the developing creative elements in Lukaku's game would be quite a nice mesh with his abilities too. So that would be interesting.
Don't they only sign aging Premier League players though, Seb? Don't worry about it. Moving on. That's a good pick. I like it. Alex, I know you've already picked for video, so feel free to just keep that suggestion if you want. Or, spread out a little bit. Everything's fine.
No, I'm going to stick with that, largely because it's easier because I've already done the work. It's Barcelona. And I think there are a couple of reasons for this. As we highlight in the video, obviously, Barca currently have Ronald Koeman in charge, but with upcoming presidential elections and so on, that could change. I think Depay has a strong relationship with Koeman and also knows Frenkie de Jong from the Dutch national side, but is technically capable enough to play under a more kind of technical possession type of manager, like a Xavi Hernandez, for example. He works as a central striker, but he also works on the left-hand side, which I think might take some of the pressure off someone like Ansu Fati to necessarily, consistently perform in that role. It gives a bit of flexibility. And I like the idea of a Barcelona front three where the players can interchange, not necessarily in terms of, specific, you're on the left to start and you're in the centre to start, but that kind of positional fluidity and interchange, I think that's when they play their best football, and Depay is the kind of technical player who would be able to do that. So I think it makes sense for a lot of reasons.
I like it a lot. Okay, let's go to AC Milan now, where we're going to talk about two players, both of whom, caveat, still could sign new deals, and in one case probably will. And hey, we're recording this a few days before it's released, so if anything changes in the meantime, sorry. The two players are Gianluigi Donnarumma and then Hakan Çalhanoğlu. Hakan is 26 years old. Let's start with him because he's appeared in a few recent videos. He's exciting people. People like him. That's my take. Who wants to go first on Hakan?
He's an interesting player. He first kind of came to attention because he's extraordinarily good at free kicks. And when he was at Leverkusen, he produced some video-worthy moments for that. At Milan, he's been slightly pushed around in terms of his playing position. He's kind of settled in the 10 role now at Milan, and obviously they're having a fantastic season, and he is very, very much a part of that. He's got 6 assists so far. But he's an intelligent player. He will drop quite deep into midfield alongside Benacer, for example, to spray the ball around. He's got a good range of cross-field passing. He's not maybe quite a kind of technical, intricate 10 all of the time. He likes to sort of sit back slightly and put passes through from a pocket rather than being involved in quick interplays and bursting through. But because of this passing ability and also because of his set piece ability, he is a consistently dangerous player. He almost hit double figures in goals and assists last season. He got 9 of both in the league. So he's certainly, in terms of output, he's pretty high up there for someone of his position. He is also only 26. So, there's, again, we're talking about players who have at least one big move ahead of them, if not potentially, in his case, even 2. It's really difficult to see necessarily where he would go.
Arsenal.
Well, yeah, I mean, Arsenal can get linked with any player that roughly fits in that position. I think at Arsenal you'd lose out. You wouldn't necessarily need his ability to drop off and pass from a slightly deeper position, because I don't think that's Arsenal's problem. I think they do need somebody who's a little bit better at the kind of quick technical interplay closer to the box. For me, the most sensible thing for him to do is to sign a new contract. I know that's a really boring answer to the question.
How dare you?
But I could also see him potentially making a return to the Bundesliga. One of the clubs that's sort of knocking around. I could see him working at RB Leipzig. I think he's got the ability to play in one of those more tucked in roles. Potentially even Dortmund if they lose someone like Julian Brandt to a more predatory club, looking to take on a playmaker who is used to Bundesliga football and is therefore adept at that kind of pressing and the athletic side of the game as well, which he's got. That could work too. But if I were him, I'd sign a new contract.
Yeah, Leipzig just feels like a step backwards, doesn't it? Even though I'm not suggesting, current position league-wise, possible outlook-wise, it just feels like a step back for a player who's, starring in an AC Milan team that are doing well.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the case, and this is why signing a new contract would be my answer, because I think the thing with Milan is not only are they doing well at the moment, but they're doing well with quite a young squad. So this is a team that, they may not win Serie A this season because it's always very hard to count out Juventus and there are other challenges there. But it's a team that feels like it's built for a run of success now. So I think, if you're there, it's probably a good time to stay on that bandwagon rather than jump off.
I like it. Seb, what do you think?
No, I'm with Alex in the sense that I think the best way forward for him is to sign that new contract. And also because he's a little bit political. I can't remember whether it was at the beginning of 2020 or right at the end of 2019, but most people remember that controversy which involved Turkish internationals making military salutes after goals are scored. He has, I think he's tweeted his support for President Erdogan in the past. And I'm not passing judgment on that. I'm just saying that a lot of clubs are going to be a little bit nervous around that. Clubs are becoming more sort of PR sensitive. And so the idea of having to deal with something like that is not that appealing. And also, you're not going to embrace that challenge for a player who occupies that level of the game. If he was a truly special player, maybe, but he's one of those guys that's just very good. And so I think that just from a financial and footballing perspective, if he's found a little groove at AC Milan, he's had a really good season. He's been, I think he's been almost ever present for Milan this year. And they're obviously right at the top of Serie A as we record. So it doesn't make an awful lot of sense.
Do you think in 7 years' time, there'll be lots of rumours about him joining either Fenerbahce or Başakşehir?
I think he's heading towards that kind of future. He's there are certain mantles that he's due to inherit, I guess. Okay,
well, hey, best of luck to him. The other AC Milan player we're going to discuss is Gianluigi Donnarumma, who people are have always been very, very excited about. Seb, you said here that there's at least intention to extend his contract, and he's publicly said that he's willing to. You wanted to include him in this plan anyway because it's at least likely that other clubs might be trying to change his mind about that. He's highly sought after.
Yeah, really interesting because obviously go back a few years and he was he angered the Milan support by wanting out, by refusing to sign a new contract, I think. And that drew a very heavy response, most notably in 2017 at the Under-21 Championship, when the Italian supporters who were at the tournament, who had gathered behind his goal, I think they showered him with fake banknotes and started calling him Dollar Rumour, which is a very clever play on words. So I don't know. I feel like I'm on the wrong side of the fence with this. I don't like him as a goalkeeper. There's something about him which I don't quite trust. I don't really believe in him being a truly top level player. I'm more than happy to accept that I'm completely wrong about that, but there's just something, I don't know. Maybe it's because he has very, very long arms and as a result reminds me of Aurelio Gomez. I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm sure it's a problem with me, but I could see someone like Chelsea making a run at him, particularly after their goalkeeping struggles. I could make a case for him going to Paris Saint-Germain because eventually Keylor Navas is going to lead a long-term successor, and PSG would presumably like some stability at the goalkeeping position, which they haven't really had properly, at least, in the kind of
can I say, poor old Keylor Navas, can I say? Because I feel
excellent
not based on what you're
but,
saying. No, not based on what you're saying. I just feel like fantastic goalkeeper. He's always been sort of second in people's fantasies, though. Do you know what I mean?
Well, this is the price you pay for playing in the kind of teams that he has. I mean, he won a succession of European Cups and a team with players like Toni Kroos and Luka Modric and Cristiano Ronaldo and Karim Benzema. You never, as a goalkeeper, you're never going to enjoy top billing. People are never going to talk about you when you sit behind all that firepower.
Well, never mind.
Did you want to discuss? It sounds like you wanted to discuss that more. You sounded more passionate about that than
I do. There's just so many sirens.
Oh, he's an excellent player, but he is nearly. He's either very nearly 35 or actually 35. So it's time.
As I said, I'm not questioning your suggestion that he's going to need a long-term replacement. I just always felt for him because I felt like it's I don't know. I've always considered him to be a case of some people always wishing for something in fantasy better than they have, but not realizing the quality that they do already have. And I think also he's not helped by the fact that he's a little shorter than other goalkeepers. I suppose that does make some of his saves look very acrobatic and spectacular. But I just feel like he's always been, better than just solid. And unfortunately, lots of supporters of the clubs that he's played at have always been willing to, or were interested in taking a gamble on a player who was less certain, but perhaps had a higher ceiling. I just wonder if that affects you over a long period of time. If you were always the player that is the second choice in the fantasy, how that makes you feel as a 35-year-old. You know what I'm saying, Seb?
I do know, Joe. Yeah,
I'm thinking about him. I'm just thinking about him. I want him to know that.
This has got into such a weird place. It's like this uncorked, this strange affection you have for Keylor Navas in this kind of weird kinship that you seem to have developed with him. It's flatly bizarre.
Keylor. You go. That guy. What an incredible career that guy has had. What I'm saying is he's an example of a player who the actual reality of his career, both in terms of trophies and in terms of playing ability and time at the top, is truly tremendous. And yet he's never been considered at that level by most supporters or many people. That's what I'm saying. The public perception of him, based on as a result of weird constant transfer stories, is not commensurate with the actual reality of Keylor Navas.
Let's be fair though, because his clubs have been complicit in that too. Because obviously, when he was at Real Madrid, they tried very hard to replace him with David De Gea.
Yes.
So the transfer rumours is a little bit to do with it, but also it's kind of partly the cost of Real Madrid in football terms are the kid in the sweet shop that just doesn't. Can't stop reaching into the
already
tins.
Got a bloody gobstopper in their mouth,
and they can't stop grabbing gobstoppers. Exactly, and so he is that kind of goalkeeper, and he's a victim of that because there's never a point at which Real Madrid, habitually say, yes, that's enough. We are good in that position. They're always reaching for something better, and so that's kind of worn off on his career a little bit. Which I agree that it is unfair, but
I hope he's happy. That's all I'm saying. I hope he's happy and content. Donnarumma, though. Let's go back to Donnarumma. Let's just assume that, let's say he wasn't going to sign another contract. Which clubs we had Chelsea. I can't see that because they now have Edouard Mendy. They still have Kepa on the books until he goes. I don't think there's any chance of it. What was the other club that you mentioned as a possibility? Oh, PSG. Of course, that's where we got to.
Paris Saint-Germain.
Alex, tell me what you think. Where would you see him? I'm always interested in this conversation as it relates to top goalkeepers because there are naturally fewer options.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the thing with Donnarumma is that he started 30 games for AC Milan when he was 16, and according to the stats, he's arguably the second best goalkeeper in Serie A so far this season. Remarkably, Pepe Reina has got the best post-shot expected goals per 90.
Another great player.
Which I'm not sure anyone would have seen. 38, but still younger than me. And so, you're...
God, you're older than Pepe Reina.
I'm older than Pepe Reina, yeah, not just, by about 100 days or 100.
That's one of those things that comes up in the pod every now and again, and it just takes your breath away. You're older than Pepe Reina. That's amazing.
Yeah, cheers. Draw attention to it again. I'm not sure everyone heard. I've got more hair than Pepe Reina, though, so...
I've got more hair than Pepe Reina. I mean, that's not something to be proud of.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, that's
that's a fair point. So I think the thing with goalkeepers is that the argument for buying them younger is that you then have consistency in the position where consistency matters most.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at someone like De Gea, for example, when Manchester United bought him, that was very much with a view to securing that position for ideally maybe like a decade. And I think that's the way people think about goalkeepers. So with Donnarumma, yes, that's probably what you'd be getting. I can't say that I've watched enough of him to be able to particularly argue with Seb's point or otherwise. It's worth saying that he's only had one season where his save percentage has been less than 71%, which is pretty good. And he's not always been playing behind the best defence. Milan were consistently sort of 5th or 6th for most of that period. So, yeah, it's got to be someone with lots of money. I can see Chelsea making sense because there's a profile thing there as well. PSG definitely makes a lot of sense, and they have taken Italian goalkeepers before. Obviously, they had Buffon, but they had Sirigu for quite some time as well. And I mean, I could possibly see even someone like Juventus going for him.
Tottenham.
Tottenham. I don't think Tottenham have the money or necessarily the. I think Donnarumma would look at Tottenham as being too much of a project for him. I think he wants to win stuff straight away.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think there's an understandable ego there that comes from the fact that he was playing Serie A football at the age of 16. He was the best young goalkeeper in the world in inverted commas. Personally, I don't think he's the best young goalkeeper in Europe. I think that's Safonov over at Krasnodar. But yeah, I mean, if he stays in Italy, it's Juventus. I think the bright lights and the big wage packet of PSG probably makes the most sense for him. But I'm not sure it's the best footballing move for him.
It's kind of what Juve do, isn't it? Like when there's a standout player at one of their rivals, or when they're threatened by something, they go and take the player. If you would feel very Juventus. No, Juventus.
No, I mean Bayern do it as not that Bayern need a goalkeeper, but Juve have got Szczesny in goal, and he's not done badly by any stretch. But you look at a team like Juventus that consistently has aspirations to be at the top level of European football because Serie A is more or less a given for them. And you do feel like that's one of those positions where, quite a significant upgrade would be worth investing in for a consistent period of time. Obviously, it would be deeply, deeply unpopular, but then Juve, they don't care about that kind of thing. And I don't think Donnarumma necessarily does either.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, best of luck to him. We have some more names on the list here. We've only got about 15 minutes left, if that actually. How long have we been talking for? A long time. Let's just who do we care about the most here? Jorginho Wijnaldum. Let's do him. This story's been around for a while. I don't understand this story because I haven't followed it in the slightest. So, Seb, I'm going to come to you first to explain to me why.
Well, fundamentally, because Wijnaldum is a little bit underpaid. He reportedly earns around £75,000 a week, which, given that he's won a European Cup and a Premier League, and given his involvement in those two successes, that is a pretty meagre wage. Now, apparently, Liverpool have been offering something which amounts to a kind of a 40 to 50% increase on that. But there hasn't been an agreement between the two. I don't know what the current state of affairs is, but it looks like one of those situations where one of those difficult decisions clubs have to make from time to time when a successful and popular player who is now 30 just comes to the natural end of his time at a club. I mean, he's had a very good Liverpool career. He was quite decent at Newcastle before he got there, so he's had a really good time in the Premier League. And now probably to earn the wage he wants, for the sake of his own future, but also kind of the space within their wage budget that Liverpool want to kind of rebuild and consolidate their success, it might just be better for them to part ways.
Okay, in which case, where can he go where at 30 he can earn the wage that he wants to? Because that is also a very small number of clubs.
Well, it's very, very difficult because there aren't many clubs around who would actually see him, in spite of all of his success, as someone really to push their chips into the table for. You just wouldn't, would you? Because he's not a midfield leading player. He's not someone that you build around, either in terms of his skill set, but also because of his age. He's 30. He's maybe got 2 or 3 years left. You're not going to pay someone like that 150 grand for 3 years. Especially now, it's just a ridiculous decision. So this is one of the first times I've actually drawn a blank. I cannot for the life of me find him a home which makes sense beyond, stupid things like saying he goes to retirement leagues and earns a fortune. Because I don't...
Tottenham.
No, because why would you? What is left for him to achieve in England? I don't think he stays in England because there's no point. He's won the Premier League. I don't think he necessarily goes somewhere where the European Cup is in sight, because while that might be nice, he's done it. He's got the medal already. I just think it's too soon. He's in that really awkward place between still having a few decent years left, but not quite enough of them whereby someone would invest heavily in him. So it's a really awkward
thing,
position.
That's why I feel for players in this position, because, as you say, he's been a real really important component of that Liverpool team. I don't think it goes too far to say that. I think he's a fantastic player. He's been a great signing for the club in that sense, and he probably does. He deserves the opportunity to make as much money as he can, because he's in a weird position that very few people are, where you have the ability to draw in many millions of pounds in a short space of time. And as you say, he's only got 2 or 3 years left. So I say, Jorginho, go get him, pal. Get that money, But where can he get it? He must be able to get it in maybe in the Middle East. I don't think China's much of an option anymore. MLS aren't sort of bringing in seemingly overseas players and paying them lots of money anymore. That's working well for them. So really, are there really no options?
Well, I think what would happen ideally for him if there was a big takeover of a second tier club somewhere, like second tier in terms of competitiveness rather than actual league level. So, for instance, had he not played for Newcastle and that Newcastle takeover had gone through even, then he would have gone there. It's that kind of signing, because a sporting director who just has a lot of money to play with would say, "Ooh, proven winner. I want him. Here, have a massive contract." That's the kind of deal that he would have benefited from.
That he could... But what about, for example, could he not be a useful transitional player for a team like Barcelona for 3 years?
But if he's looking for a big salary, and Barcelona are doing everything they can to cut their wage bill back, I mean, it would be useful for them to have him. I can't make a case for that actually happening given their current political situation.
Okay, Alex, Seb has basically said it's impossible, so go.
Yeah, no, it's difficult, and it's partly difficult because Wijnaldum's such an odd player, in that, he's become associated with this incredibly functional, tidy, ball-winning, pressing midfield at Liverpool. But prior to that, he had 4 seasons where he hit double figures worth of goals from a midfield position, including his season at Newcastle. And so, he's somebody who can get forwards and play not necessarily as an attacking midfielder, but as a late arriving midfielder in the box to score. That's not what he's been doing much at Liverpool. But there's a versatile, intelligent footballer there. I think Barcelona's a really good shout.
Oh, thank you.
And while, yes, they have wage constraints within the matrix of being the highest paying sports club in the world by squad average wage bill. So it's all relative. I think actually another shout potentially could be somewhere like Inter, just to add a bit of solidity and experience and know how he kind of fits the profile of the sort of player that Conte would like. He's tactically
aging Premier League players,
he's hardworking. He's an aging Premier League player. I could see him potentially, and I don't know what their wage system's like, but I could see him at somewhere like Dortmund, for example. They do like to have, quite robust midfielders who are tactically disciplined and intelligent. And I think the thing with him now, and this is, for example, why Barcelona works, is I can see him being the sort of midfielder who plays alongside a much younger one and kind of shepherds them through games and helps them out where they need to be. And so, him and Frankie de Jong, for example, or him and someone like Jude Bellingham at Dortmund, I could see that working really well.
The wise old goat of the Catalonia. Yeah.
Well, he's got. I think the thing that when you look at his career, what you see is a player who is able to adjust to a wide array of tactical instructions, and that to me suggests a player who's smart and who's disciplined, and who figures out what is being asked of them, and then is able to do that. And that's exactly the sort of presence that you want alongside, your kind of bright, shining midfield star of the future. You want somebody who can shepherd them through difficult patches. And so, clubs that need that to me would seem to make sense.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, specifically Alex, for that answer. I feel Alex understands that people listening to this, they want to be excited. They want to imagine players at other clubs. They don't want the old Pepe Reina to come here and say, oh, it can't happen because of the real world. This isn't the real world, Seb. This is a podcast, yeah? Get it together, prick. Anyway, sorry I called you a prick. I didn't mean that. We've got 4 minutes to talk about Lionel Messi, which doesn't feel like long enough. But, fuck him. Loads of people talk about him all the time. He could stay after the upcoming election. If Xavi returns also... Yeah, interesting. Manchester City apparently believe themselves to be first in line, right? If not, but I don't know. Seb, let's begin with you. What do you make of the situation? And personally, I will say I would love to see him play at another club just for having seen it.
Oh, me too. But I can't see it happening. I think Xavi becomes Barcelona manager at some point this year, probably in the middle of it, maybe after the Euros. And then Messi signs some kind of extension. It's very difficult because, again, financially, but if the kind of political succession at a club like that is always going to depend on a certain degree of popularity. And could there be anything less popular than allowing Leo Messi to leave, even at this stage of his career, even because of what is becoming emblematic value? I mean, it's just, you can't do it. So I think he has to stay, and I think because of the relationship with Xavi, he stays.
Particularly on a free transfer, right?
Yeah, I think so. And also, I don't want to see him play for Manchester City. I don't find that very interesting. I agree with you in the sense that I find it interesting to see him play for another club, but I would like to see him play for another club in a different type of situation, not in another possession-heavy system, not in a familiar environment with a coach that he knows quite well, or very well. Sorry. No, it doesn't grip me.
Yeah, you want to see him thrust into new waters to watch his ability to adapt and to see something different. That's a good point, actually, isn't it? We've all watched Messi for over a decade now. What we really want is less about seeing him at another team and more about seeing him in a totally different environment, like seeing something new that we haven't seen before.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Well, Alex, where can you find that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna be the Seb here.
Please do.
No, that's not going to become a thing.
I think it's the Seb. Yeah.
Become the Seb just by
the
being Russia.
Pepe Stafford Bloor, I think we'll call it, or Seb Rayner.
Seb Rayner, I like that.
Oh, Seb Rayner reining the conversation in. Thanks, Seb.
That's very nice. That's very clever. That clever web of words that you've spun.
Yeah.
I mean, Messi's the sort of player who could probably go to almost anywhere and for at least a season or two still be the best player in that league. That's I know that's a very lazy thing to say, but it's probably still not an exaggeration. For all of the political reasons that Seb suggested, I just can't see. I mean, whoever the next president of Barcelona is, they would mortgage their entire family to secure enough money for Messi's continued presence there. But I suppose if you want something that's really random, you could see him maybe after a year or two going to somewhere like Atlanta United in MLS.
He has said he wants to finish his career in America, right?
Yeah, well, Atlanta has
said
got
that in the past. Yes.
Quite a strong, or a particularly strong South American connection, and has had Tata Martino as coach. Not there anymore at the moment, obviously, but and they're a very aspirational club. I think they've replaced LA Galaxy as kind of the sexy club for those big players to go to. If he does go to Man City, obviously, then finally there would be a route to somewhere like New York City FC, where there's that connection. So you can see various little permutations, but I don't think they're going to happen for a year or two.
Well, yeah, I'm also thinking about what a player might want by moving to America. Do you want to move to New York City, or do you want to move to Georgia? Personally, I'd move to Georgia. I think it'd be more interesting
It would be more fun. Yeah,
you'd get to grips with the culture more. And you'd vote in a Democrat. But other than that,
sure. I think there's another quick point to make about Messi, which I picked up from some of Dermot Corrigan's really good reporting on this for The Athletic, is that during the pandemic, Messi was personally paying for the wages of quite a lot of Barcelona's non-playing staff and so on. There's a kind of real sense that he has, not in necessarily a wholly nice way, but he feels like he's that important to the club that he's actually doling out his money to pay people's wages and so on. Like there's such an attachment between those two entities that it feels like it would be genuinely seismic for it to break up, particularly with these looming presidential elections and so on. So I just can't see it happening.
Volcano!
No, seismic is earthquakes.
Earthquakes. I think they're the same thing, aren't they? You have an earthquake near a volcano,
I think
stuff starts happening.
I paid attention to this during school, and I'm sure there's some kind of seismic activity which begins whatever happens.
There is, Seb. There
to
is.
Cause a
Alex
volcano
has outed
eruption.
himself as a geography fool. He doesn't understand.
As a payer of attention.
Right, but
one's a mountain,
nerd.
one's an Earth's crust. Anyway, that's the end.
Earthquakes don't have to have a
volcano.
volcano.
Shush up now. Shush up. There we go.
You're just giving a specific example of geological activity without.
That's all I was doing. Happy to agree to that. Listen, it's the end of the. Oh, it's not the end. Christ, we've been talking for ages, and we're now going to go and talk to Gregg. This is exciting, isn't it? Hey, people, Aston Villa supporters, people who are interested in Aston Villa, hey, generalists, everyone, stick around. Gregg's a great guy. Seb, you spoke to Gregg, and we're gonna run that now, and then we'll be back at the end to say goodbye.
Okay, welcome back, Gregg. And actually, you know what? It's a real pleasure to be tackling a novel subject, because Villa are good. And it seems like a really, 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 really long time since I was able to say that. I suppose the point of having you on, I think we last had you on in around August, just after they avoided relegation. And it was kind of, I got the impression that you just relieved the season was over by that point.
Yeah, hi Seb. Not nice to be back. Thank you. I feel like every time I've spoken to you, actually, it's been quite a negative topic. Really, there hasn't been much positivity around our previous conversations. So it's nice to be back armed with some material to give you that's full of a bit of positivity. But yeah, last time we spoke, I mean, it was more of a relief. Last year was just a crazy year, really, and the back end of last season was crazy as well in terms of, you know, Villa had so much going on. Every single game that I was attending, it felt like it was like a make or break game, and obviously with the level of detail that we go into our reports at the Athletic, it was really quite time consuming and taxing for me as well. So it was nice when Villa survived, and even better now that I've got positive stuff to write about.
Well, let's also make your pod appearance more gratifying this time. And tell me, I think beyond them just being good, I've enjoyed watching Villa this season. I've enjoyed their performances. Most recently, like I know they ended up losing the game contentiously, but I thought they were excellent at Old Trafford against Man United before Paul Pogba did what he did. But what's actually improved? What are the mechanics behind the evolution of this side?
Yeah, there's a lot to it, to be honest. I mean, very basically, Villa have actually gone back to basics in some of their defending. The issues that they had was that they just couldn't defend. They were facing too many shots, you know, every single game, conceding too many goals. I think they had more individual errors leading to goals and shots as well. So, I mean, when you're a newly promoted side and those figures are stacking against you, it's inevitable you're going to A, concede goals and B, probably lose games as well. So they've gone back to basics a little bit. I think what I noticed during the Project Restart, where performances and results improved at the back end of last season, was just very, you know, minor changes. Things like, instead of trying to play out from the back and pass it between themselves, it was just sometimes as simple to touch it out of play or hoof it upfield. And, you know, what I noticed with a lot of Villa's kicks were they were longing towards the channels and asking the forward players to run into them. And that was just simply relieving pressure and taking the ball out of their own half into the opposition half. It was simple things like that. And then this season, I feel like they've got probably one of the best defensive midfielders in the division now in Douglas Luiz, acting as a shield in front of that back four as well. So that's tightened up the defence even further. The fact that Villa have kept 8 clean sheets out of 15 games, more than any club in the division, speaks volumes of the changes. And they've, you know, also up front and in attack, they've got Jack Grealish, who's probably one of the most informed attackers, you know, in the world right now. Almost, you know, it's not outlandish to describe him as that.
No, Grealish is really interesting. It feels like we've reached a tipping point with him, where last season, irritatingly, there were still people that sort of contested his effect and, you know, kind of treated him like he was sort of a Football League snake oil, essentially. And I don't think I'm wrong in saying that, you know, over the last kind of 4 or 5 months, that argument's kind of been won, like both internationally and at club level, because there have been times this season when, honestly, I think, with maybe the exception of the usual characters, Grealish has been at least among the very best players in the country. Has there been, is this about his individual evolution, or has there been a greater attempt at basing the side around his abilities? Because it feels like he's more prominent now than he was 12 months ago.
Yeah, certainly. And, you know, you make an interesting point there, Seb, about the fact that there aren't many other players that are performing better than him. And one of the, you know, the real standout moments I thought in the season was when England played Belgium in the in the recent international fixtures, and after the game, it was actually Kevin De Bruyne, who we probably all agree is, you know, the best midfielder or attacking midfielder in the division. He made a beeline for Grealish just to praise him for his performance and ask him to swap shirts. And, you know, if you get into that level, then you know you're doing something right. And you know, I think he's doing it for club and country now. I think he needed to get that international call up for the rest of the, you know, the country, the nation, the world, almost to appreciate how good he was. Everybody who watches him, like myself, week in, week out, knows how good he is and knows how he can make a real big impact in games. But I think he needed that wider reach, just to bring himself further. And yeah, what Villa have done specifically is they've tried to keep him in a dangerous attacking position. The two criticisms really of him was that he used to drop a little bit too deep and try to get on the ball in areas that weren't really getting the best for Villa, and the other criticism was that he didn't release the ball quick enough. It was Graham Souness who said on one of his Sky Sports appearances that he highlighted that, and Jack Grealish was quick to shoot him down on Twitter with a graphic. Saying,
you know what's interesting, Greg? Like,
this is how many chances I've created.
But the thing about him releasing the ball is because I feel like this is one of those misconceptions about Grealish, and it has been for years, is that like he's selfish, doesn't release the ball too much. And I would say that the problem for him at different points has been the opposite. Like, he passes too much. Like, I want to see. There have been instances where, for instance, particularly in the last championship season, where you looked at him, you thought, you can't quite make up your mind whether you want to be a dynamic player that, a Gascoigne type, or someone that's just a pure playmaker. And you think sometimes just trust your ability a bit more, which is a really weird thing to say about Grealish. And it feels like this is something that he might have been battling against for quite a long time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's what makes the criticism from Souness even more confusing and baffling, really, because in the years previously, the criticism of Grealish from other outside sections was that he didn't score enough goals or he didn't get enough assists. So he's always been battling something. He's always been fighting something, whether it's his party boy image, which I think was wrongly given to him, even though he was on the back pages and the headlines for the wrong reasons on a number of occasions. He's always been battling that. He's always been battling the fact that he hasn't scored enough goals or made enough assists. He's certainly done that in 2020. And then, the fact that he doesn't release the ball quick enough. Look, he's created so many opportunities for his teammates. I'm pretty sure I'm safe in saying he's created the most in Europe out of all the top leagues. So, and what Villa have done is, as I was trying to say earlier, is that they've kept him in attacking areas. He's got more touches in the box than he's ever had this season. This season compared to previous seasons. So Dean Smith has clearly identified the area where Jack Grealish can hurt opponents, and he seems to be doing that now.
Let's talk about some of the pieces that have been installed around him, because obviously one of the big differences between this season and last is the standard of the recruitment. There are good reasons for that. Obviously, just a little bit of housekeeping. Jesus Patak left over the summer. He was dismissed by Christian Perzai and replaced by Johan Lang. Johan Langer? How am I pronouncing that?
Langer, I think, yeah.
Langer.
But, we'll go with either.
Okay, you learn something every day. Talk to me about the standard of that recruitment. Has anything changed behind closed doors in terms of the operating procedure, the way they do things?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, really. I'm always wary of slating Jesus Patak too much, because it was a really tough job for him. He was the sporting director at the time where Villa needed to completely rebuild their squad. They got promoted into the Premier League, had only a small section of players to turn to, and they had to go and recruit 11 or 12 players. So that was always going to be difficult when you have to work within the financial parameters as well that that the owners and that the league set in as well. You can't go spending ridiculous amount of money because of FFP. So Villa had to buy 10 or 11 players within a budget of about 120, 130 million. So you can do the maths there. So you're looking at players, every individual player at an average of 10, 11, 12 million pounds. So you're not going to get an incredibly talented Premier League team. And this time, what Villa have been able to do, having survived by just a single point, in the previous season, is they've been able to look at the players that have performed well in that first season back in the Premier League, look at the ones that, and say maybe weren't quite up to scratch. We can move you on now, or put you into the fringe player category, and they've been able to recruit quite aggressively in 3 or 4 positions. The goalkeeper, Emi Martinez, absolutely brilliant
good
acquisition.
Player, the goalkeeper,
brilliant.
Really, I'm actually surprised that Arsenal let him go. But I think he's it's interesting because he's quite a stable goalkeeper, isn't he? He's not sort of I don't think he's necessarily going to make the kind of the he's not going to be on the highlight reels for his saves. He's not as watchable as some others, but he does everything really well, which is a really a really nice quality in a goalkeeper.
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant, you know, and the fact that he'd been at Arsenal for 10 years, and let's be honest, none of us really knew how good he was. And you know, he's come to Villa. The last 6 or 7 months for him, he played at the back end of last season for Arsenal, obviously, and helped them towards a couple of trophies, which is quite rare at Arsenal, isn't it? So, let's be honest. And you know, and he's now at a Villa team who can probably say that they're ahead of Arsenal at the moment. And again, that wouldn't be an outlandish comment either. So it's a good move for him, a good move for Villa. They felt like they were able to get a 28-year-old in the peak of his career for that money, £20 million. It was an opportunity they couldn't let go.
I think also, I mean, Matty Cash has been really impressive. It felt like there are a lot of clubs that probably could have taken that gamble on him and brought him in from Forest, but you know, it's kind of credit to Villa's judgment. The one that interests me, I think, is Ross Barkley. I don't know what his long-term future is like at Villa, but it seems like Barkley's always seemed to me like, firstly, someone that needed to play at a specific level. He needed to be at a side where he was going to be not a focal point, but pivotal to what a side was doing in the attacking sense. First question, how has he changed the way that Villa go forward? Because we talked right at the beginning about how much I enjoyed watching them, and that's partly because they are just a watchable side. And it feels like Barkley at different times, he hasn't been consistently excellent or anything, but at different times he's been very important to that.
Yeah, certainly. The last couple of weeks, last month or so, has been frustrating for him because he's been out with a hamstring injury, and what initially we thought was a short-term injury is turning now into a medium-term injury. He's been out for a while now, so the key for him is to get back playing again. But those early games, he came in. I think his debut was the 7-2 win over.
I think it was,
Liverpool.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, third game of the season. Yeah, so that was that was his debut. What a brilliant way to mark his debut. A couple of goals, and a real leading force in that team. What he's brought different to that team is, one, he can take the pressure off Jack Grealish because he becomes another player that defenders have to focus on because of his qualities. He can actually get the ball from midfield in central areas where previously Villa couldn't, and drive forward. And previously it was only Grealish who was able to do that. And he's also got this this ability to score goals from outside the box. He likes to get his shots off. Very accurate with his shooting as well. And as you've seen, already got 3 or 4 goals this season. So he will be a big player for Villa in the second half of the season. But they've just got to get him back fit.
Yeah, I suppose it's funny. When he went down with a hamstring injury, you worry because obviously when he joined Chelsea, he had that very serious hamstring injury, which I think had kept him out for something like 4 or 5 months before the move. And so you always have that. I don't know if it's the same hamstring, but you always have that kind of. It's like his version of Harry Kane and his ankles. It's the same thing, isn't it? Yeah. It's just the one that you worry about. Just to finish off, obviously last season, given the the amount of flux in the squad and the number of players that had to be replaced and brought in, anything more than 17th place was going to be a huge success and survival. What's the long-term plan at Villa now? Like, what beyond just this season, when presumably top half finish would be brilliant? What's the strategy behind the club? Yeah,
so I think I touched on this in an in-depth article I wrote in The Athletic, probably about the midpoint of last season. It was survival last season. It was finishing 17th by a point was an absolutely brilliant achievement. It was survival, and then it was all about surviving last season, and then moving on from there. The next season will be a little bit more progression. Increasing the revenue streams somewhat by putting better sponsorship deals in place and attracting bigger partners. Okay, the whole COVID situation has impacted on that, but it was things like that, slightly moving up their positions in the table. Let's move from a relegation threatened club to a club that are somewhere in the middle of the pack and being able to be a bit more comfortable in the season. And then it's trying to push for for a cup run further. Villa got to the League Cup final last season, and unfortunately lost to Man City. But it's now a long time since they've won a trophy. 1996 was the last time, so that's in the back of their minds. They want to start to become this team that are not only established in the Premier League, but are then challenging for European positions, challenging in the latter rounds of competitions, and just slowly building that squad together. As I mentioned this summer just gone, it was about fine-tuning, bringing 3 or 4 players into various positions. Next summer, it might only be maybe 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 even. And then it's becoming self-sustainable as well. There's a big push in the academy to bring players through, to develop their own. And if Villa can do that, and actually be bringing players of their own through into the first team, and then it maybe even selling a couple on at a much bigger profit, they'll become self-sustainable. And the owners are very, very enthused and ambitious, and I think we've spoke about that on the pods before.
Is that 96 League Cup final when Andrei Kanchelskis got sent off for deliberate handball on the line? Is that the one?
Yes.
And then Dean Saunders scored. Yeah, God, I'm old, Greg. I'm old.
No, sorry, is that 90? That's 90. Yeah, no, it is, isn't it? Yeah, 94 was Leeds. Yeah, 96 was
96 was Man United, and
96 Man United. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I just remember Andrei Kanchelskis getting sent off.
Yeah, you're right.
And everyone loving it because obviously bad things were happening to Man United, which is no one hates that. But I just remember him. Do you remember in old Wembley how you used to have that huge distance between the sort of the north and south end of the ground,
yes,
and the pitch, and he just stood there looking sad for a while. It was just really weird. And then Dean Saunders scored the penalty. Greg, thank you so much for coming on, and we will catch up with you towards the end of the season.
You're welcome. Thanks, Seb. Take care.
Okay, well, that was Greg and Seb, and wasn't that lovely? And now we're going to say goodbye. Alex, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Seb, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
And I will say goodbye. Goodbye.